Welcome back to She Can, where women lead by example. We interview women from all walks of life and all over the world on their journey, how they got to where they are today, to be visible role models and mentors to others and support and guide others on their journeys. And I'm super excited to talk to Nina Marenzi today. Nina, you are an old friend, which makes me so happy. I've been trying to get you for years. You
really?
are, yeah. You're the founder and director of the Sustainable Angle and the Future Fabrics Expo. You set up the Sustainable Angle in 2010 to initiate and support projects aimed at reducing the environmental impact of industry. And you started the Future Fabrics Expo in 2011, where you showcase curated sustainable textiles. It is now the largest dedicated sourcing destination for certified, sustainably and responsibly produced materials in fashion, home, and interiors. It's also an educational platform to help people understand the impacts of our raw materials and our fossil fuel dependency. There's so much to talk about, Nina. I want to congratulate you, first of all, because I remember when you started and we were all thinking, what is she doing? And now you're here. So tell us a bit more about this journey, about the things that matter to you and how you understood how you want to matter in the world.
Yes, thank you very much for having me and for tracking me down. Can't have been that hard, but thrilled that we're now here together. Yes, I have started this a very long time ago. It seems way more than 15 years. And I would say the reason why I started this and why I had the motivation in the first place was probably because I was extremely frustrated with what I researched and saw was not really available in terms of materials that were used for what you are wearing, but also anywhere where you would see fabrics, textiles, etc. Even though that was not at all my sort of trade. I never studied fashion. I never studied anything to do with textiles or the supply chain at all. I always came to it from the sustainable angle, hence the name, and always looked at it from an environmental policy angle, from generally environmental issues and ecology principles. And that is because I studied political science and I grew up in Switzerland, and that was sort of what fascinated me. And clearly everyone at the time was already talking about environmental issues. And I guess I listened to my mother, but that was consciously or subconsciously, it clearly sank in. And she was already talking about the Club of Rome, for example, which was set up in, I think it was 67, and The Limits to Growth, which was one of the most important publications of the time of how our behavior and how we were living and the way the economy was run was inevitably going to result in problems, also on an environmental level. So all of these things influenced me clearly. And so when it came to choosing what dissertation I was going to write, this is about 2008, I think, 2007, something like that. I had already worked on environmental issues beforehand, and so this was not new to me, but I did have to write a dissertation, and I decided to write it on why organic cotton wasn't more used in the fashion industry. And this is a time where probably most of your listeners might not be aware of, but you could only find anything with organic cotton in sort of the bio shops, as they were called, or the Reform House in Switzerland and so on, and not really in sort of the wider shops. Anyway, so I interviewed a lot of people who were working in design and in creative industry. I was seeing a lot of artists, given the way my private life was. And I was fascinated how often people were actually very open to it and were actually interested as well. How come that there wasn't more of this material around? And the reason why I started with organic cotton, because at the time that was the only certified material that was really proven. The entire supply chain and traceability was guaranteed with it. And that was an important point. Anyway, so it was clear that there was appetite from creative industries for this. And so I wrote about it, and I did a lot of research on who was actually producing these materials. And so it came through that actually one of the most important sort of links, if you want, are these trade fairs. And the trade fairs that I then visited and so on, they were quite adamant when I interviewed them. This was just a trend that was not interesting. So to cut a long story short, I got very frustrated by the lack of interest from these sort of organizations, and then decided that actually the way to go for it is to do it myself and try it out. And so that's what I did. And so the first Future Fabrics Expo took place in 2011. It was very small. As so often, we benefited hugely from like-minded people, such as the London College of Fashion, the colleague I met early on, Amanda Johnston, who's still curator today. We've been working together for over 15 years, which is wonderful, or rather over 14 years now. And so all of it came together, and we could see how there was masses of interest in it, and we went from there, and so it grew.
Nina, I want to show off for you a little bit. You had in 2024, you had over 70 speakers, more than 50 innovations, and 75 best practice mills and suppliers. Now, what an incredible growth is that?
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit more about both. Should we start with the Future Fabrics Expo? Tell us a little bit, what is your vision now for 2025? How do you keep growing? What impact are you having?
So the Future Fabrics Expo really is there to provide a platform to source easily these sustainably and responsibly produced materials for fashion and beyond. So also including now home and interiors and other industries. And so this sourcing platform is there in order to make it really easy, very inspirational, packed with educational background information, which was always key from day one. And we actually have about 10,000 materials on display. As you said, some of those numbers, overall, we have over 200 exhibitors. So it is actually, it has become much more than a sourcing destination. It really has become a platform where just about everyone who is in this field wants to be and have the chance to find these materials, to find these innovations, to have a conversation about how to move forward. So 2025, the way it's shaping up, the next one is going to be the 24th and 25th of June in London. It is in the same venue, which is over 3,200 square meters. We just about to finish our sign up of exhibitors, which has gone extremely well. So we're thrilled with that progress. And there seems to be a great appetite for these materials and innovations. And we're now looking also at impact investment, getting impact investors in, looking at those innovations. And we've become, very happy to say, a bit of a magnet. So from the initial start of pulling people by the hair to come and listen and see and find and be inspired, it is now a magnet, and people come and hear and they want to be there because also the energy is so good. It's such a vibrant space now, which is what I'm most proud of, I think.
Nina, I'm so inspired if I listen to you. And as I remember when you started, and I remember I went to one, it might have been the first one, and it was, it was tiny, but it was already something. And so I'm wondering, what do you feel are the most exciting innovations? What are the things that you see at the fair that you organize that really gets your heart pumping?
So we grappled with that a bit because our title is the Future Fabrics Expo. And you could think that everything that we show is futuristic and is extremely revolutionary, which of course a lot of things are. They're pioneering, they're innovations. But actually a lot has to do with also reinvent what we already have. It is looking at waste streams that are not tapped into yet. So for example, agricultural waste. So when you're growing a plant for the fruits, then very often the there's a lot of agricultural waste or material or stalks and leaves and what have you that is not used, but it should be used, and it can be used also for fibers, or the fibers can be used for fashion materials. And so that's what I find very exciting. But also, of course, circularity. So how do we use and reinvent, redesign, and remake anything that is already in the fashion system? So rather than trying to use necessarily waste streams that could go back into sort of true circularity that stays within the industry and is being reused for the same product, which most of the time is the most energy efficient way of doing it, and also many other aspects make more sense. You do sometimes have the same thing in fashion. So if you have textiles, so textile to textile recycling is very interesting. But also redesigning before, or let's say, for example, producing without making a lot of waste in the process. And how can you then, hopefully, small waste that does occur, how can that be immediately used for something else, or for the next cycle? But also, again, cross industry. So anything that is waste from one industry, how can it be used in the next one without making it from a high quality to a very low quality? So typically would be from a garment that you're wearing down just to a rag for cleaning. That doesn't make that much sense. There's a lot of steps in between. So those things excite me personally very much. But then, of course, there's also lots of things in the biofabricated field, or there's a lot of things that are, like algae. How can you use them perhaps and make finishes for water repellent textiles that usually were made from synthetics and the petrochemical industry? So how can we be using or having a completely new approach to design, where right now it was, I'm sure a lot of listeners have heard that from you, is the make waste model, and how can we not have it like that, and how can we have it in a circular design process? So there's a lot of very interesting new things coming, not just from a materials point of view, but also how do you approach it, how do you manufacture, how do you design it in the first place, and how does the end customer use it with the consciousness of wearing it, of course, as long as you can, reinvent it once you're tired of it, how can it be remade, how does the sorting of it go once it's recycled? There are so many steps in between, and it's really fascinating to me.
Nina, and we're going to talk about the sustainable angle where you do consultancy in another second. But first of all, I'd love to ask you, how has this changed your life? And how, as a mom and a wife and a consumer, have you changed your life, and therefore can give tips to our younger generations, or all of us really, on how we have to change our lives?
Well, first, I would say it's extremely exciting to try and take something very simple and think about, is this the best possible products that you can use for this specific purpose, perhaps? So let's say you've got a toy and you're looking at it and you see your child perhaps sucking on it. Then, of course, you should think about, well, what is it actually sucking on? What is that material? And is this maybe intended to be in the mouth? And perhaps it's all made of plastic, and it might have been in a warehouse for a long time. So make sure it's actually washed and look at the label. And perhaps it's stuffed with synthetic, even though outside it says it's made from organic cotton. So what's the filling? And then you can even open the seam and you see, oh, actually, this is polyester. This is not what it said on the label on the outside. So, then I would probably, what did I do? I remember stuffing it, removing all the polyester filling in my son's soft toy, and stuffing it with, I had sort of this organic cotton filling that I found somewhere, or this organic wool that I could trace from UK suppliers. Was actually very easy to find. But then also I thought, like, why do I actually buy this? Why don't I just take old clothing from me and stuff those animals with that? And, it's just kind of fun, and you just challenge yourself. And rather than just being led by what is on the label and what you're being told, just use your own common sense. So I don't want to say common sense anymore, because then you sound like you're, a Trump follower, which I'm definitely not. So I think you just challenge a bit and think outside the box and be curious and do your little research. A bit of research is always good for everyone, and go on the website. Now, most of respectable brands have a sustainability section. Look at that, but don't be fooled either. It's thinking just whatever it says there is true. Or when you go into a shop, question it, because now there are sales assistants that are trained specifically to answer questions that a customer might have. And even if they look at you as if you were an idiot, stay polite, but maybe write a letter afterwards, and just do all these sort of things that we have. And I think really the purchasing power is huge that you have, and you as a single person have agency. So to really do something and be curious doesn't mean you need to be idealistic and, you're being told, you can't change the world one by one anyway, but you can in your own family for sure. That's a start. Or questioning, these products that we're cleaning our houses with. Is this really ideal? Or can you just clean your kettle with a bit of vinegar, as you perhaps would have found out in a chemistry lesson? So, try and apply that and just reduce as much as you can. But also, I think it's often now seen as being joyless. And that shouldn't be the case, because there's so much you can do on the resale or on the vintage, or it's so easy today on shopping online, secondary things, pre-loved or whatever they're called now, which is very much what I certainly do as much as possible. But also, I think we should stop the finger pointing and telling everyone off if you spot somebody that from the outside, it might not look like that, and judging immediately, because of course, perhaps clothing is not their biggest footprint. Their biggest footprint is perhaps something completely different, might have way more CO2 emissions caused, and that's where they are trying to make a difference and reducing it. So this whole judging on, you should do this and that, and what, you're still shopping here and there. We have to be a little bit more generous and have interesting conversations instead. So that's kind of how I approach it. So being curious and questioning things and looking at the label, doing research, I think those are definitely things that all of us can do.
Nina, I love what you said, and I think it's very important. And yes, let's have all the conversations, the graceful conversations where we are not canceling people or their actions out, but we have the conversations to understand all the different ways of approaching a challenge. And the environment and sustainability is definitely something we have to look at and research so much more, especially for our everyday lives, and also lead with that. Nina, so tell us a bit more about the sustainable angle. How do you work? How do you consult? How do you work with your clients?
So firstly, I have an absolutely incredible team of about 10 women. Sometimes we're 20 when we come closer to the Future Fabrics Expo. We haven't set out to be an all-women's team. It just so happens. We did have a man once in our team. All good. And so we're quite a strong, closely knit team. We do advisory services indeed for brands. And that's mainly an extension of the Future Fabrics Expo. So people come to us, companies come to us, they want workshops or they want to have specific sourcing advice, which we then give them. We have a showroom in London. But also the sustainable angle is a not-for-profit organization, whereas the Future Fabrics Expo now for the last few years is a UK established company, but the sustainable angle is still supporting the educational activities. So they're very closely linked. And so I would say education is a big thing for us. We share a lot of information at the Expo, and that also feeds into our advisory services. A lot of those big infographics that you see at the Expo, or all the research that goes into all of these informational posters, that then also feeds our advisory services over the year.
Nina, so what do you feel are your main lessons? You are really doing something unbelievably important. You've grown this into a really powerful vehicle. What do you feel are your main lessons?
The main lessons, how we got to this, or how I got to this. Certainly find great partners and people to work with is certainly one of the most important things. Also believing in younger people in the team and giving them a chance to also say how their input and their contributions, because I guess it is very much all going to be young people who have to take the lead in this, and they have great ideas, and it's great to have a team with young people, very much. And so I would say it is hard when you always have to feel that you need to fundraise constantly for the educational activities that you do, which is a lot what we need to do fundraising for. So that can sometimes be a little bit a lonely place when you have to go and try and find partners who can fund education, especially in times where universities and so on have all of their budgets restricted. It's very much students who need to find this information. So we try to do as much as we can, but it's not always easy. We would like to do more. So I would say, it's always that sort of cheap thing to say, oh, never give up. But sometimes I think you also need to accept that there's only so much you can do, and look to the next day and think, next time we will have perhaps it will be easier to fundraise, or perhaps we will find more partners. So rather than beating yourself up, just stick to it without just sort of being overly disappointed when something perhaps doesn't work out the way you initially thought it would be. But then also, I think just believing in the sort of positive feedback. I think it's very nice to hear from, and I'm saying this more as me, what I'm personally trying to do is when you do see an organization that does a great job or is really doing well, you should really comment on it. And if you are somewhere and you see the team, go to them and say how much you appreciated the effort. Because even though it looks maybe that it's wonderful and everyone's there and have a great time and it looks buzzy and so on, it's so nice if somebody comes to you and says, I really appreciate this or that. And because after all, there's always humans behind it. And there's a lot of work and the labor of love behind what a lot of people do in sustainability. And it's not necessarily the most lucrative industry you can find work in. So it's very, it's something that really matters to give feedback where you do have a positive experience.
Nina, thank you for that. So let's get into the areas that you find difficult to fund. What are those educational projects that you need funding for? How much funding do you need?
We definitely have, throughout the year, we would like to do more for universities and students, taking the expo, not necessarily the expo as such, but curated areas of the expo or educational areas that we have, whether that is, for example, on how to replace plastics or in textiles or home and interiors. What is wrong there and why is this such a big problem? Because we all live in places where we're surrounded by materials we sleep in, etc. So we have to be aware of what materials are in there. They can be very bad for our health. So there's a lot of education and raising awareness, and that's typically something where we would like to do more of, but that requires more funding. So anyone working with a foundation or anyone that is keen on supporting sustainability in areas like that, please do let us know, and we'd love to do more things and reach out to more students and universities if we can produce more of that.
Nina, and so what does it mean for us to live or operate within our planetary boundaries? What does that mean for you, and how does that influence what you do?
Well, we certainly try at the Future Fabrics Expo to be offering solutions and material solutions that will enable a company to produce within planetary boundaries. Certainly discourage anything that is definitely not going to be on that trajectory. That means very much moving away from fossil fuel-based materials. That's one of the key aspects for sure. And we're trying very hard to promote innovations. That's another thing for what we do fundraising, by the way. Our innovation hub is really supporting innovators, and they do not have to pay to be shown. So very much encouraging anyone who is finding solutions that are not dependent on fossil fuels, for sure, in a nutshell. That's definitely one of the main things, just try and stay within planetary boundaries, but also, of course, anything to do with biodiversity. So from day one at the Future Fabrics Expo, we had our guidelines by which we are selecting materials, and biodiversity has always been one. And we very much highlighted when there is a positive outcome on protecting and restoring biodiversity. So that's another huge one. That also means anything that comes from industrial agricultural systems is something that we are not, that we're trying to stay away and very much try to promote regenerative agricultural systems. So that's typically another one. Agriculture is a big thing in terms of planetary boundaries. So those would be some of the most important ones that we try to promote.
Nina, so you've told us about the challenges you're facing. You have told us about how you reframe them. What are you most proud of to date?
Definitely. It's the fact that we are still alive and kicking, that we're still seen as the sort of place where innovations are really shown first. That's something that was a lovely testimonial from one of a big brand. I'm not sure what I can say, but it's on our testimonials page. I guess I could. Anyway, I think to be the place where people want to be showing when their latest innovations coming out that really hits it from an environmental and social impact point of view. To be the gathering place and the convening place of organizations that are working in the same field. And to really create this, I don't want to say positive energy because it's such a term that has been so overly used, but it's really, you can feel it when you walk in because it is such a buzzing place and has such great momentum, and it's so dynamic, gathering so many people who all offer different solutions. So while we are keen to point out what is wrong in the system at the moment, the Future Fabrics Expo is a sourcing platform and a sourcing destinations for solutions. And that is what I'm very proud of, that we somehow have a good balance between the two, and it feels a motivating and inspirational place. So when you leave, you definitely feel like you can you have agency and you can make a change with incredible materials that provide proper solutions.
Nina, that's what I think is the most outstanding thing. You really provide solutions, and that's what propels you forward. And I think that's really important. So I want to really shout out about that. So, what are your plans and goals? How is 2025 gonna look like and beyond?
2025 is going to look more exciting than ever because we are part of London Climate Action Week. We have been a flagship of fashion and textiles there already last year, but we will be again this year. And given that what's happening in the US and the challenging circumstances, and the US pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement, etc., I think London will be a real place that may gain momentum and be a center for whether it's in impact investing, sustainability solutions, climate solutions, and it's great to be part of that. To fall into London Climate Action Week. We are also part of during the time of the London Design Biennale, which is very interesting. So because we also have home and interiors there. So I'm quite excited about all of these things coming together in June when we host the expo. So it should be a really good moment and an important moment in time.
Nina, I have one other really important question. The uptake of industry, of what you're putting forwards, or how you're supporting the industry. What is the uptake within the fashion and home industry? How do you feel it's progressed in the last 15 years?
Oh, it's massive. I mean, it's a huge difference to what it was when we started. It's no doubt. It's certainly seen a lot of traction over the last few years. Definitely the EU regulations helps. But ultimately it depends on also the customers really wanting it and asking for it. And it takes time. These transitions are not painless, and it's sometimes a lot to ask, and these things are not overnight. So we just have to stick with it, and they often are expensive to make these changes in a short time, but of course over longer time that is possible, and that's why we should have started earlier. Unfortunately, we're getting very close to 2030, which is when 45% of emissions should be reduced by a fashion sector, for example. So it's getting tight, but that, it just means we need to keep going and look for more exponential solutions. And fashion is definitely an industry that has the potential for it in terms of how you can reach people in the street and like arts, culture, music. These are the industry can go viral, and fashion is in that. And so that's why it's a great industry to affect change, which then hopefully has a knock-on effect on lifestyle and so on of the people buying those things that are responsibly and sustainably produced.
Yeah.
So
we need
that's
to
why I think
fuel the demand.
Yes.
Nina, what would you like our listeners to take away from your story?
I think trying to understand a little bit more how things are produced, be curious about that, and using your insights with what you have in is this really the, let's put it this way, when to understand what is your purchasing power, to question things, but also to understand a bit more how these things really are produced and try to support those brands that are doing it, especially if it's independent labels and so on, to really put your money where your mouth is always, if you can. But also understand that things take time, and sometimes it's really short-term versus long-term. And I understand that sometimes when you have your back towards a wall, you can be in very tricky situations, and then it's not so easy to go for the sustainable option. But perhaps if it's not that day, you can do it in another form, in another way. It doesn't have to be necessarily only ever be what you buy. It can also be how you make changes with your consumption patterns, with reinventing something, and finding creativity in that and inspiration in that, and the fun and joy. So it sounds a bit idealistic, but I really do think we've kind of lost that a bit. And ultimately, fashion should be a creative thing that you do. As we all know, fashion is a verb, and you can have your fashion moment without spending anything. And I think we've lost that a little bit.
Yeah, I think we need to redefine what we believe is sort of the luxury, industry in general. Nina, I love everything. I'm excited by you. I'm excited for you. I would like everyone to look out for the 24th and 25th of June, where the Future Fabrics Expo is taking place in London. There'll be impact investment angle, which is hugely exciting. We need more money in those industries.
We do.
And thank you so much for leading by example today on She Can.
I try my best. Thank you very much.